They say a hero is only as good as its villain, and lucky for Spider-Man, he has some of the best in the superhero genre. With the release of Marvel Spider-Man 2 coming later this year, I thought it would be great to run through 10 different villains that both Peter and Miles could possibly face off against in the upcoming sequel. Insomniac's first game, which debuted back in 2018, definitely didn't fall short when it came to its villains. This is mainly due to the fact that we had to take on the entire Sinister Six, which was composed of Electro, Rhino, Scorpion, Vulture, Mr. Negative, and of course Dr. Octopus. In Spider-Man 2, we know from the reveal trailer that we will have to come up against both Kraven the Hunter as well as the fan favorite Venom. But another adversary that we could encounter is actually the first villain Spider-Man ever fought in the comics, and that is Chameleon. He is a Russian super spy and master of disguise who can create lifelike masks of anyone he meets, enabling him to mimic and resemble literally anyone. Chameleon could be the perfect fit for a villain in Spider-Man 2 because he is actually the half-brother of Kraven the Hunter, so it's more than possible for the two to pair up and take on both Miles and Peter. In the comics and animated series, Chameleon tends to impersonate Spider-Man whilst committing several crimes, which completely ruins his public image. I definitely think he would be a great villain to face off against and could cause some serious chaos for our two heroes. The next villain who I'd love to see is the Lizard, otherwise known as Dr. Curt Connors. Now, if we remember back to the post-credit scene in Miles Morales, we can see Curt Connors has been helping Norman as they try to cure Harry's sickness. And this is of course where we see that it's the Venom symbiote that is essentially keeping Harry alive. Back in the first game, one of the backpacks that we could find contains a vial of the Lizard's blood, and we learn that Pete has already encountered this villain before, as he says,
"With this vial of the Lizard's blood, I was able to mix up a cure and turn him back into Dr. Connors. Too bad it didn't last."
Those last few words leave a lot to work with, and definitely opens the door on Curt Connors potentially returning to being the Lizard in Spider-Man 2. Someone else who we met in the first game is none other than Dr. Morgan Michaels, which is one of the aliases for Morbius the Living Vampire. Dr. Michaels was the one who was part responsible for the creation of Devil's Breath. He's a gifted biochemist who specializes in genetic diseases, and Spider-Man noted that he looks unhealthy, being pale, thin, and having dark circles under his eyes, which leads him to briefly suspect that he might have a genetic condition of his own. You know, it could really be nothing, but it's probably just a rare blood disease that will result in an experimental failure, turning him into a pseudo-vampire. Morbius could be an excellent side or mid-game villain for either one of the heroes to face off against, and I think I know a way which could tie him in perfectly. See, in the first game, there are some files that you can find in Norman Osborn's apartment, and these state that Michaels has been the Osborn family doctor for decades and was responsible for prescribing experimental treatments for Emily Osborn back in 1997. Harry has also inherited the same illness from his mother, and although Dr. Michaels wasn't able to save Emily, Norman might just bring him back to try and help Harry. Of course, this is all just speculation, but I truly think that the Morbius character needs some serious redemption after the embarrassment that was its film. Next, I'm going to punch in a returning villain from the Spider-Man 2018 game, which was Dr. Otto Octavius, otherwise known as Dr. Octopus. After the events in the first game, Otto was stuck behind bars in the raft, and although that facility has been broken into before, I can't see them repeating that storyline for the sequel. Instead, I think Dr. Octavius could play a more counseling role for Spider-Man, akin to the one that Hannibal Lecter plays in Silence of the Lambs. My main reasoning for this is that really besides for Miles and MJ, Peter doesn't really have many other people in his life. And I know that sounds super depressing, but if you think about it, the end of the first game left him without his maternal figure in Aunt May, as well as his closest mentor and dear friend Dr. Octavius. So I feel like it could be a very interesting story point when times might get tough for Peter. Another villain who is safely tucked behind bars is Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin. He played a role in both of Insomniac's games, with the latest being in Miles Morales, where he attempted to regrow his empire from the raft, and I can see a similar thing happening again in Spider-Man 2. Whether or not that be us having to deal with some more Fisk construction sites, or perhaps an entire side arc dedicated to the big man himself. One key reason why I want to see Fisk return is because it gives us the best chance to see a Spider-Man Daredevil team up, which I know everyone would love to see. Next up we have Sandman, who I reckon would be the perfect villain to have in one of those chase missions where we have to swing through and catch up to him as he sandstorms through the streets of New York. Insomniac seem to love these giant chase missions scenes in their games, for instance with Rhino charging through the mall in Miles Morales and Shocker in Spider-Man 2018. I think the classic bank robbery scenario would be the perfect fit, maybe in a side mission where Miles and Peter have to follow a series of burglaries and cluing together piece by piece that it's been Sandman all along. I would also love to see in some shape or form the development of Spider-Man's biggest enemy, being the Green Goblin. Now I hear a lot of people thinking that he's going to be the big bad secret villain in Spider-Man 2, because after all they hid that Doc Ock was the main villain leading up to the first game, but I truly hope that this isn't the case. Look, I wouldn't be pissed if he was the main villain because I think it would be epic nonetheless, but I want Norman's character arc to marinate a little longer, with him having to deal with maybe Harry becoming Venom or perhaps even dying, which would drive him crazy and vengeful. This would leave us with an entire game being Spider-Man 3 solely dedicated to the Green Goblin, which could be the perfect conclusion to the trilogy in my opinion. In saying that, I think we will definitely see some little bits and pieces that start to build the Green Goblin story. Of course, Harry and Norman are going to play a huge role in this game, and we could even see the creation of the good old Goblin formula in an attempt to cure Harry's sickness. And if the Green Goblin isn't the big bad in Spider-Man 2, you bet there will be a post-credit scene that's going to tee it up perfectly. The next villain I think we might see is Yuri Watanabe, or rather her vigilante alter ego, Wraith. Now, if you haven't played through the City That Never Sleeps DLC, you probably aren't familiar with Yuri's homicidal tendencies. Pretty much, Yuri, when she's still a good guy, is working with Spider-Man to take down Hammerhead. This doesn't go well for them, as Hammerhead ends up killing a lot of her team, which really shifted her mindset on things. They eventually capture Hammerhead, and Yuri is about to kill him in cold blood just before Spider-Man can stop her. She essentially got given leave from the police department after this incident, but this didn't stop her pursuit of Hammerhead, who escaped custody. After collecting a series of tape recordings that are being left at crime scenes, we find out that Yuri has been working with an undercover cop pretending to be a therapist, who actually has one of the Magia enforcers as a client. The undercover operative gets killed by this bad guy, and we find out that Yuri has taken justice into her own hands by tracking down the enforcer and silencing him for good. She was actually the one who was leaving all the tape recordings, and she ends up calling Spider-Man to explain everything.
I can only trust me.
You can't kill people, Yuri.
Apparently I can. And you know what? It felt good.
You need to turn yourself in.
For what? I just dispensed justice. True justice. And I restored a little bit of balance to the world.
You're my friend, Yuri. I don't want to come after you.
You do what you have to do, and I'll do what I have to do. Goodbye, Spider-Man.
So it's extremely possible that we stumble across more crime scenes from Yuri's vigilante lifestyle, which could result in us having to take her down. I think it's a super interesting take on one of Spider-Man's closest allies in the original game, and I'm really interested to see where the sequel can take her as a potential villain. We saw people dressing up as him in the first game, but crossing paths with Mysterio would be at the top of my wish list when it comes to Spider-Man 2. The PS5's technology would perfectly fit the illusion elements that a boss battle could have, teleporting us seamlessly into different realities and landscapes. Like a few of these villains, Peter has already fought him in the past, as we found a piece of his helmet in a backpack in the first game, which actually gave Spider-Man a couple ideas for his eye lenses. I've always thought Mysterio was one of the coolest villains, so I'd really love to see him in the game. The penultimate villain on this list is Venom, and of course we already know that he is a confirmed villain in game who's going to be voiced by Tony Todd, which is going to be sick. Anyway, I do want to touch on the character because from what we've seen in the post-credit scenes, Harry Osborn is connected with the Venom symbiote. However, something I want to see is before we actually get to see Venom be Venom, I hope the symbiote attaches to either Miles or Peter and then returns back to Harry or possibly even Eddie Brock. And yes, he is actually confirmed to be in the Insomniac universe because we can see his signature on a good luck card from the Daily Bugle. The reason it needs to attach to Miles or Peter first is because a lot of the traits from Venom come from the symbiote's experience in time with Spider-Man, like the ability to shoot webs, climb walls, and even the giant spider emblem on his chest. This, however, does vary on universe and origin story, because in the Sonyverse, Tom Hardy's Venom didn't connect to Spider-Man to our knowledge. Still, I think it's a detail that they should stick to the core origin story for this game. Also, something I know a lot of people want to see is that when or if one of the Spider-Man does get the symbiote, we want to see them drastically change in their behavior, personality, and sheer aggression. Now hear me out, a fight between the two Spider-Man with one wearing the symbiote suit would be so cool, and I think it would totally flesh out the relationship between Miles and Peter even more. And the final villain on my wish list is Carnage. Now I don't think Carnage himself will be in the game, but I think we could see the creation of him, or perhaps even Cletus Cassidy in a post-credit scene somewhere, because after all, Carnage is the offspring of Venom. I know that's a long shot, but it's just another opportunity to set up an interesting storyline for Spider-Man 3. We know Spider-Man 2 is months away, and that was all confirmed in a few Twitter posts last week. So make sure to click on this video here if you want to learn about the new leaked release schedule. And of course guys, take care.